Hi everyone. Okay, so here we are with the chapter 8 and 9 tests review. The first two sections, as always, are going to be the oral comprehension. The first one is the à l'écoute. You'll be watching a video online and I will repeat a short paragraph or a short dialogue. I will repeat it twice in the video. And your job is to just try to gather the main words of it. You don't have to actually understand every single word that I've used, just to get enough information that you can answer either true or false question like here or a minor multiple choice. Your dictée then is a dictation. Here again, it'll be a video and I will read through a paragraph twice. You have the paragraph itself right in front of you. You just have a couple of missing words. As I go through and I read this, for example, I might say avant-hier, Désiré a pris une décision à propos de ses vacances. So I will read it at that pace, where at each blank I will actually do a little pause for a couple of seconds rather. After you've figured out what you think is the right pronunciation, what you think is the right spelling, I just want you to make sure to go back and check for grammar. Specifically, we're looking for words that sound the same but have different possible spellings. A lot of times that happens with our verbs. For example, we have like an ER infinitive. Parler would sound like the present tense vous form, parler. Would also sound like the past participle, parler, with an E accent aigu. Same thing, same pronunciation for the imparfait, for either the je or tu form, parler, or for the il form, or for the il plural form. So in this kind of case, you really just want to go back and make sure you're thinking about how many verbs do I have, for example, what's the context for the rest of my paragraph? Am I in past tense? Am I in future? Am I in present? And then count the number of syllables. So for example, with passé composé, you'd have to see et parler or a parler, some sort of avoir form in front of it that adds an extra syllable. So just be aware of that, especially with verbs. Another common place where people make errors is things that sound the same, like a and a. This a means in, at, or to. It's a preposition and it goes before a noun. Whereas this a is the conjugated form of avoir. Oftentimes that's going to potentially have a noun coming right after it, but in our case we all have a lot of past participles coming after it, for example. But you can kind of tell because this is going to be sort of in between a subject and another word, whereas the a is after both, one or two verbs, and then you have it coming after that and before a noun. Okay, so just words like that, you want to make sure to go back and check for grammar, make sure that you are on the right track. For both of these together, I know that your test is open book, but I would suggest setting a timer for yourself and spending only 10 to 15 minutes total on this. Because you have that recording, it's tempting to go back and do it over and over and over again. But like I said, I would set a timer and move on. And if you have time at the end of the test, go back. Next is the question personnelle. We need complete sentences here. That's really important. What I mean by that is that you have to have a subject and a verb. My recommendation for going over these questions is first to look and see if you have a question word. If you have no question word, like who, what, where, when, how, etc., then it's a yes or no question. But if you do have a question word, you just maybe want to underline it or make note of it and know the meaning. Then the second part is to count the number of verbs and from there understand what the tense is. Okay? For example, if you have one verb, you're either doing present tense or imparfait for now. If you have two verbs, then you're either doing passé composé, which passé composé, if you see the accents on the word passé composé, you can think, oh, I've got those funny endings, e, you, or I, for example. Or you're doing maybe the futur proche or the passé récent, or some other verb plus an infinitive. And all three of these, the second verb is going to be the infinitive. Okay, so identifying the number of verbs and therefore the tense, and then the third step is always reuse the structure. Okay, you want to reuse, if you have one verb, use one verb. If it's present tense, use present tense. Go back and just make sure that you're matching with with whatever the question is doing. So let's look at number 1, for example. Comment venez-vous à l'université généralement? The first thing I want to do is ask myself, do I have a question word? I do. It's comment, which means how. Then I want to go and find the number of verbs. I have 1 here, and I look at it, and this is present tense. Okay? So when I turn this around, I'm going to reuse that. I'm going to use venir, and I'm going to use it in present tense. My vous, of course, will be transformed into je. My venez, I want to transform into match it with je. So that'll be je viens. Copy paste usually a lot of the other words that are still in the question itself. So je viens à l'université généralement. And then answer the how question. How is it that I come to the university? This is talking about transportation. Remember, we had certain prepositions that go with transportations. We had en for motorized vehicles, and we had a for things that you get on or that you mount. So in this case, generally I come to the university by car, so I would say, en voiture. But if you walk, you might say à pied, or maybe you come à vélo, which would be on bike. Okay, next one, numéro 2. Combien d'heures dormez-vous le soir? First thing is question word. I have combien de, which is a quantity, how many. What am I counting? I'm counting hours. Look at the number of verbs. I have just 1. It's dormez. It's present tense. I want to turn this around, transform it. I have je dors. Remember that dormir is one of these split root verbs, taking off 3 or taking off 2 plus endings. Je dors. And then I'm going to answer the question. So, I don't know, most of you would probably say something like 7 heures le soir. I sleep for 7 hours at night. Numéro 3, avez-vous déjà voyagé en train? There is no question word here. You're going to find it always at the beginning. So this is a yes-no question. Next, go to the number of verbs. I have avez and I have voyager. I do have this word, which is important for negations, so that if you are negating this, you need to pick the correct one. Let's say that you're answering oui. I'm going to transform my sentence. My vous becomes je. My avez becomes et. My voyager drops down. I'm going to watch out for vowels. J'ai voyagé en train. Pretty straightforward. If it's a no answer here, I'm going to say non. I still am going to keep the same stuff, but I'm adding ne pas. But do I want to just use simple ne pas? No, I want to use the opposite of déjà. So the opposite of déjà is either jamais or ne pas encore. I could use either here in this case because it's with passé composé, and I'm going to say je n'ai pas encore voyagé en train. Numéro 4. Depuis quand conduisez-vous? Look for a question word. I have quand. I do have depuis in here, which we remember means since. So since when? How many verbs do you have? I have 1. It's present tense. Okay. Switch that around. Reuse the structure. Vous becomes je. Conduisez, present tense, becomes je conduis. And I want to reuse depuis. I've asked a quand question, so we have to remember that this goes with a moment in time, not a duration. So since when have I been driving? And I want to give a moment in time, so I'm going to say, I don't know, 2016 or something like that. Okay? Numéro 5. Êtes-vous déjà descendu au Texas? Look for a question word. I do not have one. I just start off directly with my verbs. How many verbs do I have? I have 1 and 2. I do have, once again, a negation here that I'm going to have to use if I want to turn this into negation. Let's say that I'm answering affirmatively to this. I'm going to say oui, and I'll reuse the structure. Vous becomes je. Et becomes suis. Descendu gets dropped down. Add an extra E here if you're a female. If not, no extra E. Au Texas. Okay, yes, I've gone down to Texas. If my answer is non, I'm using the same stuff, but I'm adding in the ne and the negation. The opposite of déjà is pas encore. Drop everything else in. That's a U here. Au Texas. Okay. Next section will be vocabulary. Fill in the blank. There's going to be more options than blanks. That's pretty straightforward. I don't want to spend too much time on that. Getting into the structure sections, having verbs here with split root and the ones that are done like venir. So the ones with split roots are the ones like dormir. Example. Over here in the first column, you're taking off 3 letters. You're taking off M-I-R. So now my root for that side, for the je, for the je, tu, and il forms is the same root. On the second half, I am taking off 2 letters, which is IR. So I've got the M still there. I've got whatever that consonant is for the nous, vous, and il plural form. Then my endings are SST, ONS, EZ, ENT. Dormir is done like sortir, sentir, servir, partir. Venir, on the other hand, is a different ball game. Venir has its own stuff going on. It's not really a split root. Je viens, tu viens, il vient with a T. Nous venons, vous venez, ils viennent with a double N, E-N-T. Remember that venir plus de plus an infinitive gets you your passé récent. And like venir, we could have also done it as tenir. Tenir is the same thing. It means to hold, but it's done with a T instead. And you want to make sure that you've got all of the verbs that go with these as the base verb. So you could have prefixes like, for example, devenir is to become. Revenir is to come back. Tenir, meaning to hold, can go with maintenir, to maintain. Oops. It could go with contenir, to contain. Or obtenir, for example, to obtain. Okay, so just be ready to know these 2 groups. You've got the split root, like done like dormir, and you've got the not split root, which is done like venir and tenir. First, of course, you're putting them in the right place on this section and then conjugating in the present tense. Next is doing passé composé. For every single one of these, you absolutely need to have 2 verbs, right? So quick review on passé composé. In your online test, there will actually be 2 blanks here. Your first one is for a verb, your second one is for a verb. So let's talk about passé composé. Remember here that you have subject, 2 verbs. Your first verb is either avoir or it's être. The conjugations here are j'ai, tu as, il a. Nous avons, vous avez, ils ont. Être is je suis, tu es, il est. Nous sommes, vous êtes, ils sont. The way that you choose which to use here is by either memorizing the list or the song that goes with être. If it's part of that list, you want to do it with être. Then the second thing is your past participle. Okay, if you have a regular ER verb, for example, you take off ER and add E accent aigu. IR, you take off IR and add I. RE, you take off RE and add U. And then, of course, there's a bunch of other irregulars. If you're using être as your first verb, you need to watch out for agreement here at the end of your past participle. That means potentially adding an E, an S, or an ES to make it agree with the subject. Okay, that does not happen with avoir. No agreement on avoir. Okay, so making sure that you're filling in the 2 verbs here. It's pretty straightforward as long as you know that song, but there are 7 verbs that can switch. Okay, so the 7 verbs that can switch, namely going from the être song to becoming avoir. These are they. Let's see. Aller, parti, sorti, venu, descendu, retourner, arriver, rester, monter, tomber, entrer, né et mort, devenu, revenu, rentrer, passé. Okay? These 7, which normally go with être, can use avoir if after your subject and your blanks for your verb, you have right here a direct object. That is to say that there's no preposition. Okay, like an a or a de or a pour or avec or à côté de. If there's nothing here, it's just directly the direct object, it's the noun, then you're going to need to use avoir here. Okay, and avoir does not require agreement. If there is just the subject and the verb and it's a period, you're going to stick with the être if it's one of those 7. And if you have the subject, the verb, and you do have a preposition here, and then this then becomes the indirect object, then you're going to also stay with être. So having the preposition or having the period makes you feel safe, okay? You can go with the original plan, which is the être song or the être list, okay? I'm going to stop here and make a second video.